shining through the African continent. Voice of higher education, revitalizing higher education in Africa. Human resources are greatest masters, transforming Africa's education. We espouse with virtues and scholarship. We research with joy, liberty and truth. We facilitate teaching and learning in all disciplines and cultures, transforming Africa's education. AAU, the heart of excellence, changing Africa's educational thoughts. AAU, swing of talents, love of passion, amazing, it's a promoting innovation, according community, equity, and standards, transforming Africa's education. We espouse with virtues and fast scholarship. We research with joy, liberty and truth. We facilitate teaching and learning in all disciplines and cultures, transforming Africa's education. AAU, the pillar of higher learning, spreading Africa's development. AAU, one of friendship, our fellowship, partnership for higher education. Africa's intellectual advancement and progress to achieve African goals. We espouse with virtues and our scholarship. We research with joy, liberty and truth. We facilitate teaching and learning in all disciplines and cultures, transforming Africa's education.
The President of the AAU, Professor Bakri Saeed Osman, Secretary General of AAU, Professor Olusola Bandele Oyewole, and all AAU governing board members, past and present, government representatives from various countries, members of the diplomatic corps, vice chancellors, presidents, rectors, pro-vice chancellors, and other institutional heads gathered here, our keynote speaker, Professor Karen Ferreira-Meyers, and our panelists and our moderator for today's high-level panel discussion, colleagues from various African higher education institutions, senior executives and representatives from development partners organizations, captains of industry, international higher education experts and consultants, invited guests, distinguished participants, friends from the media, staff of the Association of African Universities, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I welcome you to the final and main event of the African Universities Day Celebrations 2021. On this same day, many years ago, the AAU was founded, and our mission and vision still remain solid. Thank you all for making time to join in the session today. I'll quickly take you through our program lineup for the day. So we'll have the AAU Secretary General giving a welcome address in the person of Professor Olusola Bandele Oyewole, and we'll also take an address from the AAU President, Professor Saeed Bakri Osman. We'll also have the keynote address on the theme, Building Technology-Based Resilient Universities Now, by Professor Karen Ferreira-Meyers from the University of Eswatini. And we'll have a high-level panel discussion with the moderator in the person of Professor Goski Alabi. She'll be introduced properly before the session. And we'll take our closing, official closing remarks from the AAU Secretary General. I would quickly hand over to Madam Nodumo, the Director of ICT, Communications and Knowledge Management here at the AAU. My name is Naomi Dako, and I am your MC for today. Madam Nodumo, you can take over.
Thank you very much, Naomi. It's a pleasure to welcome you again to yet another celebration of the Africa Universities Day a day that we celebrate annually. And because of the times that we are living in, we have learned how to do this event virtually. And I believe that we have become more effective in terms of hosting this event and ensuring more people participate in it. It is my pleasure right now to introduce my boss so that he can make his speech. I'm pleased to introduce to you Professor Olusola Bandele Oyewole. He is the Secretary General of the Association of African Universities. He is also a former staff member of the Association of African Universities. He is a former staff member of the African Union Commission. He's the former president of the Association of African Universities. He's the former vice chancellor of the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta in Nigeria. He's a professor, full professor of food science and technology. Professor Olusola Bandele Oyewole has published several scholarly and peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, books, conference, and technical papers. Professor Olusola Oyewole holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Obafemi Awolowo University in Nigeria, a Master of Science degree from the University of Ibadan, and a doctorate degree in food science and technology, also from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. Professor Oyewole, you are most welcome to give your welcome remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Nodumo. The President of AAU, Professor Bakri Saeed Osman, and all the AAU governing board members, past and present, and I can see our Vice President, Professor Lilian Salami of the University of Benin, government representatives from various countries, members of the diplomatic corps, vice chancellors, presidents, rectors, pro-chancellors, and other institutional heads gathered here today. Our keynote speaker, Professor Karen Ferreira-Meyers, and our panelists and moderator for today's high-level panel discussion, colleagues from various African higher education institutions, senior executives and representatives from development partner organizations, captains of industry, international higher education experts and consultants, invited guests, distinguished participants, friends from the media, and I'm going to include students of various institutions, higher education institutions in Africa, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols duly observed. On behalf of my colleagues at the Association of African Universities Secretariat and the regional offices, I take this opportunity to welcome you all from across the length and breadth of the African continent and beyond to this very important event on the calendar of the African Higher Education, the celebration of the 2021 Africa's Universities Day. You will know that this will be my first African University Day or week as the Secretary General of AAU. The theme for this year's celebration is Building Technology-Based Resilient Universities Now. It was aptly chosen to help us reflect on the effects of health-related pandemics on African higher education delivery and what we can do to overcome the challenges of this time. In line with this year's celebration, the AAU had lined up a rich program banquet which commenced on Monday, 8th November, with a special members-only event. During the Monday's event, we successfully introduced 54 new AAU members that were admitted between 2020 and 2021. We also used the opportunity to discuss the benefits that AAU members gain from joining the AAU. Indeed, we've been communicating this to all our members for so many weeks now. Another feature of the Monday's event was a discussion on how collaboration could be improved among AAU members so that the association lives up to our promise of being a vibrant platform of learning for the benefit of our members. We really received very useful feedbacks. For example, we were told that there's a need, we need to carry out a Tuesday. We had a session, a successful session where we received testimonies from several faculty members that have begun to upload some of their courses onto the virtual AAU e-learning Africa learning management system. This is an excellent system that all universities in Africa need to subscribe to. Ladies and gentlemen, the AAU e-learning LMS provide a free platform to be used by African faculty members to upload their digital courses quickly and easily. It is a response to the identified needs for an effective and easy to use learning management system where faculty members could easily upload their teaching contents. The advantage of the AAU e-learning Africa LMS platform and research institutions. In fact, the time we are in now is a time in which we need them more than ever before. The AAU Afrinics session also covered how African universities could manage their public IP addresses to build scalable campus networks. The AAU and the Afrinic signed an agreement several years ago, and based on this agreement, Afrinic has agreed to give a 50% discount on all bases. AAU member universities and national research and educational networks can become Afrinic members and get their own IP resources for a minimum of $100 and to take advantage of the numerous membership benefits that you are entitled to by virtue that many other higher education institutions organize their own events to commemorate this year's Africa University Day. I appreciate your efforts in engaging your stakeholders to contribute to the dialogue concerning the theme of this year's celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, as I bring my address to an end, I wish to reiterate the AU's commitment to continue working with you all in ensuring the achievements of the goals of the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, CESA, and the Agenda 2063, as we aim to build technologically based resilient higher education institutions. I will encourage all of you to actively participate in today's session. And I thank you once again for joining us throughout this week and for celebrating this year's Africa University Day with us. Before I conclude, let me appreciate all the board members of AU. You are fantastic, my president. I appreciate you, and I thank you for all your commitments to AU. You and with you, we shall take higher education in Africa to great heights. Thank you for your attention. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Professor Oyewole. We enjoyed your speech, and we are really inspired by your leadership. Please allow me now to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Professor Bakri Saeed Osman. He is the president of the Association of African Universities. He is also the president of Sudan International University. Professor Osman is also the former vice president of the Association of African Universities. He is the UNESCO chair in school health education. Professor Bakri Saeed Osman has published several scholarly and peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, books, conference, and technical papers. He obtained a bachelor's degree in medicine and surgery from the University of Khartoum in Sudan. He also holds a PhD from the University of Leeds in UK and a Doctor of Medicine from the University of Newcastle. And he has also held the Fellowship of the Royal College of Pathologists and the Fellowship of the Royal College of Physicians in London, UK. Professor Bakri Saeed Osman, you are most welcome, and we look forward to your remarks. I don't know if you are you have been able to unmute yourself. If not, please do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Nodumo, for your introduction. Thanks my friend, Secretary General, for his kind words of interrupted internet services in Sudan. So I have to come to Cairo actually to be able to join the internet. And unfortunately, I'm sitting here in a hotel which charges $100 a day, and they still failed to connect my laptop. So I luckily bought an Egyptian SIM card or an old Motorola phone, which I'm using now. So that's life. Secretary General of AAU, Professor Olusola Bandele Oyewole, and all AAU governing board members are present. Government representatives from various countries, members of the diplomatic corps, vice chancellors, presidents, rectors, pro-vice chancellors, and other institutional heads gathered here. Our key speaker, Professor Karen Ferreira-Meyers, and our panelist moderator of today's high-level panel discussion, colleagues from various African higher education institutions, senior executives and representatives from development partner organizations, captains of industry, international higher education experts and consultants, invited guests, distinguished participants, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I address you today on behalf of the governing board of the Association of African Universities. I warmly welcome you all to the Africa Universities Day celebration, which is held since a new leadership, that is, new governing board members and Secretary General, took over the affairs of leading our beloved association. I would like to extend our profound gratitude and appreciation to all our members and stakeholders for your commitment to Africa's higher education and for working closely with the AAU and our predecessors over the years. Your efforts have contributed greatly to the association occupying its inviolable position as the umbrella body and voice of higher education in Africa. Honorable guests, for us here at the Association of African Universities, and for all of us as higher education institutions across Africa, the Africa Universities Day is the special period where we get to celebrate the birth, or in this case, the establishment of the AAU some 54 years ago, November 12, 1967. The birth of the AAU has been celebrated over the years to put the spotlight on the achievement of African higher education sector with the view to reflect on progress, challenges, and opportunities faced by the sector. The celebrations are also aimed at attracting increased support for higher education. Our celebration this year is on the theme, Building Technology-Based Resilient Universities Now. Among other reasons, this theme is inspired by the fact that 20 months after COVID-19 was declared the pandemic, most African universities seem to still be in a predicament about how to move towards a sustainable process of technology-supported teaching, learning, research, collaboration, and administrative operations. Therefore, as the AAU, it is our mandate to bring, can you hear me well? Yes, okay. It's our mandate to bring higher education institutions together through this platform for us all to share lessons and to learn from each other, special institutions that have deployed strategies have shown some promise. Indeed, the AAU has organized several webinars since the beginning of the pandemic to bring experts together and to hold discussions towards guiding and support. Event present the unique opportunity for us to focus our discussions on how we can build technology-based resilient universities, resiliency which can transcend turbulent and unpredictable times, such as when the world was hit by a health crisis, which forced educational institutions to shut down and cancel all forms of their physical sessions. Distinguished guests, the roadmap city requires a multidimensional approach, an approach that considers visionary leadership with the right culture to drive institution-wide commitment, a well-defined digital transformation strategy, funding for technological infrastructure, solutions for internet connectivity, technology literacy for staff and students, skilled technical human resources, quality open educational sources, among others. These important issues indicate that rich understanding of the key issues as far as the topic of building technology-based resilient higher education institutions is concerned. We also want this session with the specific resolutions concerning what we can do differently in our own spaces and institutions to contribute to attaining quality African higher education, as well as to ensuring that our institutions can withstand the test of time and are able to overcome any challenges we may face. Distinguished guests, our education and training system need to be improved, and the power of research, teaching, and innovation resident in individual higher education institutions need to be governments, development partners, civil society organizations, international and non-governmental organizations, among others, to strengthen African higher education. At this juncture, I do not want to take the wind out of the sails of our keynote speaker and high-level panelists. Their experience of knowledge on the topic for discussion makes me confident of the delivery on the theme. Once again, I would like to thank you all, Your Excellencies, honorable guests, and contribute to these discussions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bakri Saeed Osman, particularly that you have shown towards the activities of the association. We appreciate that you travel session. I request those that are not speaking to please mute. Our moderator is in the name of Professor Goski Alabi. She is the president of Lawe Open University here in Ghana, and of the African Council for Distance Education. She is an accomplished academic, a practitioner, an entrepreneur with experience in higher education, consultancy, and related regulations. Professor Goski Alabi has published several scholarly and peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, books, conference, and technical papers. She is a professor of quality management and leadership. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and a Diploma in Education, all from the University of Cape Coast here in Ghana. She also holds an MPhil degree in Food Science from the University of Ghana, Legon. She holds a doctorate in Business Administration from the Swiss Management Center and also holds a PhD in Business Administration from the Central University of Nicaragua. Professor Goski Alabi, you are most welcome to this session. I'll be assisting you as you introduce the keynote speaker. I hope you have been able to unmute. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Nodumo. And it's a joy to see you always. You look amazing today.
Thank you.
And also permit me to acknowledge our president. I just want to say a very big thank you because he's an example of resilience and commitment, coming all the way from Khartoum to Cairo just to be part of this session shows his commitment to the process and the development of African universities. Thank you, Prof. And also to my very senior colleague and very good friend, Professor Oyewole. I say thank you for that inspiring speech. I am grateful that I have been considered to moderate this session, and without much ado, standing on all established protocol, I would like to hand over to Madam Nodumo.
Grateful for your support.
Wow, wow, wow.
It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Karen Ferreira-Meyers. I request those that are...
Like he speaks all those languages.
I request those that are not meant to be speaking to please Afrikaans. She also has basic knowledge of Siswati, Italian, and Mandarin Chinese. She is an associate professor, coordinator, and senior lecturer of linguistics and modern languages at the Institute of Distance Education, University of Eswatini in Southern Africa. She holds a PhD from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. She holds a master's in instructional design and technology from the Open University of Malaysia. She holds an LLB degree from the University of South Africa. She holds an LLM degree from the University of South Africa. She also holds a Master's of Arts in Linguistics from the University of Stellenbosch. She has a BA Honors in Portuguese from the University of South Africa. Professor Karen Ferreira-Meyers has several diplomas and postgraduate diplomas. She has published a monograph on Francophone autofiction. She has published several articles on autofictional feminine writing, on crime fiction, on the 20th and 21st Francophone, Anglophone, and Lusophone African authors. She has also published in the area of distance and e-learning. Professor Karen Ferreira-Meyers, you are most welcome to give us your keynote address. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all those warm, welcoming remarks. I will be sharing my screen, and while I do so, I would first like to thank the Secretary General, the President, the Vice Presidents, the Vice Chancellors, the Pro-Vice Chancellors, all the colleagues here, the board members of the AAU, as well as the students and all the participants and general stakeholders. I would like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to talk to you this morning. I'm really humbled by this opportunity, and I'm really honored as well to talk to you this morning. I am trying to put my slideshow in this manner so that you can follow with me. I know there is some interpretation available, and as I often interpret myself, I will try to speak a little bit slower than I usually do, so that the interpreters can was clearly highlighted by the now with the exclamation mark. So let me give you first an overview of my talk this morning or this afternoon. And I think it has already shifted. Okay, so I will briefly introduce the topic, give you a bit of the context, and then go back to basics. What is resilience? How do we build it? We will look at the place and the importance of technology in the construction or the building of resilience in African universities. And for that, I think we have a few solutions, such as open education, open technologies, open educational resources, but also values and characteristics that we have come to describe as 21st century skills, namely flexibility and self-directedness. In order to do so, there are various steps to be undertaken. And one of such steps is definitely the training and professional development of all of us. We need to definitely think of where we are, where we want to be, where do we want to go. So looking at the past, the present, and foremost the future is extremely impossible. And after that, I will briefly conclude. So let me start. I'm sorry, but I seem to be hearing my English voice, and I'm not sure why that is.
Hello, Prof. Karen.
Can you hear me clearly?
The interpretation.
Yes, I think there was a little issue there. Let me talk to you briefly about the introduction and the context. I won't show you the slide because I've got the impression that there's something going wrong with the slide. So, of course, we need to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and all the hardship, all the obstacles, the difficulties it has brought. But as some have said, there has definitely been a silver lining. And the silver lining has different components. One of them is definitely that the pandemic has shown us that we need to continue to reflect on what we do in the field of teaching and learning, and in particular in institutions of higher education. The shift from an expected situation of classroom communication to a distance or online environment has had an impact on various things, motivation, but also acquisition of skills. We know that today there are many informal and formal learning resources and tools, and they are proliferating online. We know that these tools put a greater emphasis on self-directed learning and learners assuming more control over their learning activities. Are we ready to give them that control, to allow them to do so? Now, we know that 21st century skills and technology are part of what we are doing, what we are trying to prepare our learners for. So before we can implement further resilience building interventions, because we know that over the past almost 2 years, we have been putting in place many of those. But before we need to do further interventions in this area, we need to look at the impact the pandemic has had on our core higher education processes, and also the impact on the adoption of new strategies. And I've listed some of the items we need to look at. When we look at the impact, we need to look at the admissions process, the promotion and the marketing of our courses, our programs. We need to look at the academic administration process, which looks at issues like the calendar. How many of our higher education institutions have had to shift the calendar, to adapt the calendar, not once, but many times over the last 2 years? We need to look at the teaching and learning process, the classes, the online classes, the tutorials, the assignments we give. We also need to look at the academic qualifications, the exams that lead to qualifications, all, the plagiarism, the cheating in online tests and exams. We need to look at that. We also need to look at the research and innovation processes. Are we doing enough research? Are we innovating fast enough to follow what the world is throwing at us? We need to look at student accommodation in campus, but also student activities in and off campus. Student financial assistance. I'm sure many of us have noted how our registrations have dwindled, how many of our students are no longer able to afford higher education. What are we doing towards ensuring that they can? And that goes hand in hand with student, but also with staff welfare. Now, the impact on the adoption of new strategies is also multifold. We need to look at the advantages of online platforms for teaching and learning, but also the challenges that come with that, the obstacles that are standing in our way. I've touched upon academic integrity relating to the online teaching and learning process. That is something that we need to analyze further. Now, higher education institutions have to let go of their academic knowledge. They have to become willing partners in collaboration with digital learning experts, collaboration with various industry stakeholders. Very often universities are still looking at themselves, inward looking instead of outward looking. We need to collaborate with our teachers, but also with the important stakeholder that is our student. So we definitely have to look at the impact of all the changes that we've made and that we are still to make. Now let's go back to basics and what is resilience? Resilience is an individual's capacity to respond to stress in a healthy manner so that he or she can achieve goals at the lowest physical or psychological cost. That's where it starts from. But it has gone much further because we are now looking at what was seen as an individual characteristic, and we are personifying it. We are putting it in the hands of an institution which of course is the combination of individuals, but it's much more than that. So we note when we look at the literature on resilience that there are various conceptualizations. They vary very widely. So many see it as a fixed attribute of an individual, and we often neglect the impact of the context being first and foremost the COVID-19 pandemic, but all the situations many countries of the African continent find themselves in on a regular basis. I like and draw upon psychological, social, cultural, and environmental resources. And technology is definitely one of those resources. Now, I'd also like to go back to a book written in 2014. It's a book on higher education, on how higher education institutions change. And Keza proposed a change model that draws on 6 theories of change, namely scientific management, evolutionary theory, political theory, social cognition theory, cultural theory or theories, and institutional theory. So for this author, effective change requires a multi-theory approach. And I was very happy to hear both professors talking about the multidisciplinary approach. All of us are coming from different backgrounds, but we all bring something to the table, something important for us to work with and to grow from. So embedding resilience enhancement strategies requires changing in, for example, staff's underlying values, assumptions, structures, and processes. And KESA refers to a second order change, which is that which requires staff to reflect on their particular role in relation to resilience and to re-examine their priorities and approaches to teaching and to adopt the role of leader, to become change agents so that student resilience can then be promoted at the different levels of the institution. So I also want to say that resilience, as we noted, may be seen as an innate or a personality trait or characteristic. It can be developed. So it's not something that we have at birth and then that's it, or we don't have at birth and then that's it. No, it's something that we can develop and enhance through direct action. We also need to note that risk is the exposure to a disaster. Resilience is the opposite. It's the recovery of that disaster. So how are we able to recover from the disaster that has been with us and that will probably be with us for quite some time longer still? Now, I also want to look at what Dušek in 2020 tried to look at while addressing organizational resilience. So Dušek documented the definition of resilience and noted that it was different over time. And organizational capacities underlying the 3 stages of resilience, so the meta capabilities of organizational resilience, depend on context. Our context in Southern Africa is different from the one in West Africa, in East Africa, in North Africa. Nevertheless, we must all build resilience. And Dušek also wanted to highlight that resilience is highly complex and profoundly involved in social contexts. So probably societies that have had to overcome many obstacles, as societies, they are more resilient. Similarly, institutions that have had to overcome different obstacles, different challenges, and are working towards finding solutions are probably more resilient than institutions and context where there has been some form of smooth sailing. So the existence of strategic contexts that are knowledge-based and drivers such as the availability of different resources, be they technology or otherwise, social resources, networking, for example, and also the sharing of power and responsibility. All those strategic contexts are extremely important. And I wanted to share with you this visual, which shows that organizational resilience is based on anticipation. But could we anticipate COVID-19? I really doubt. Anticipation and then coping, accepting that there is a situation and that we need to do something, so that we need to action, we need to develop and implement solutions. And then the third big component is that reflection and learning from what we are doing and what we are supposed to. Now, why build resilience? Now, of course, we know that when we increase resilience by preparing ourselves and by following up on major disruptions, that will have a benefit in the immediate and the longer term consequences of whatever disaster. And that goes for the institution, but it also goes for each one of us who have been struggling mentally and many of us also physically during the pandemic. So building resilience can reduce the emotional impact of whatever goes on around us. And I want us to think about what Maha Bali, Professor Bali, has talked about when she uses the concept of pedagogies of care. So resilience discourses champion strategies for mediating and recovering from risk, and for identifying and cultivating individual agency and performance. That's what Dean in 2009 said. And I want to add, for identifying and cultivating institutional agency and performance. So at some point in time, we were thinking that digital transformation and technology-based learning was years away. And we thought that, as institutions, we would see, what we would do when necessary. And we were quite relaxed in our adoption of technology. And then comes the big boulder, the COVID-19, which forced us to say, we need digital transformation now. So we need resilience now. There is no longer a choice. So the disruptive nature of COVID-19, we know that when we think of, the last 40, 50 years, let's say the whole period after the 2 world wars, there is nothing that has really provoked us and brought us into action, I think, as the pandemic. So the whole spectrum, from childhood, early childhood education to postgraduate study, we have all been tested by this pandemic. And so we need to have a systemic rethink and also a re-engineering of educational and institutional choreographies, and along various critical dimensions. Now, how are we going to build resilience? We've started, many of us have different experiences, and I'm sure that during the high-level panel discussion, more examples will come up. But I wanted to touch upon something that goes along the lines of fostering resilience through wellness. So wellness is, I would say, one of the key points for us to be able to accept that we need to build resilience and to get the necessary tools to build it. So we need to acknowledge our fears. We need to plan for the future. And the problem with fear is when we are gripped by fear, we can't move. So acknowledging that makes us able to go beyond it. We need to look at wellness resources to build resilience to the various stressors that are in our daily lives. We need to make sure that we have counseling services for staff, for students. They need to be available so that people can get help when they need it. We need to look for role models. Some of our colleagues in the various universities all through the continent have done well, even during the pandemic, have been able to become more resilient. Let us look for them. Let us model them. Let us show and ask them to explain to us what they did to make sure that they can continue as an individual. And then look for institutions that have been resilient so that even there, we can add on to what is already available. It goes through peer support and mentoring and creating a sense of community. So let us not forget those that are struggling today. Let us also identify the struggling people, the ones that have a hard time, and reach out to them, lend a hand, and help them when possible. On this slide, I wanted to show how much all the types of resilience, the stakeholder resilience at the individual level, staff, students, management, work hand in hand or have to work hand in hand with institutional resilience. And all that then goes to the bigger picture, societal resilience. So we need to make sure that those different types of resilience work hand in hand and assist each other, like the wheels of a car, like when we think of mechanics, like the structures flowing into each other. Now, when we look at the characteristics of resilient institutions, which is what we should be doing to learn lessons from them, we need to look at different components: flexibility, communication, the support structures that are in place or that need to be put in place, leadership, and also strategic planning. So resilient institutions, be they resilient to the pandemic or to other political, social, natural disasters, have effective communication channels and a coherent crisis communication strategy. I am fully aware, and you are also, that at the beginning of the pandemic, we were looking up to many of our leaders, and very often we did not get the communication that we needed to keep going. And I think our leadership has learned from that, has learned that communication is key in whatever challenges come our way. We need to have an established, coherent learning and teaching disruption plan. How many of us have that in place today? Emergency response plans at different levels. Existing flexible, blended, and digital learning strategies and solutions. And the support to staff, to students, the strong sense of staff and learner community. Have we been able to build those communities? Are we setting up structures to continue building them? Because we're not out of the woods yet, as far as I'm concerned. So when we look at an idea of a conceptual framework of university resilience, I wanted to propose this one, which is based on Abdullah and his colleagues, a 2020 resource, that if we use something that is knowledge-based, if we have resources available, be they social, technological, or any other resources, infrastructural, and we then go through the different stages of resilience, as I indicated earlier, that funnel will lead to us to an increased or an improved institutional resilience. Now, an organization, and I've just taken this visual because I think it's quite interesting, organizations have been looking at the concept of resilience for a much longer time than universities have done, even though we are organizations. So, for example, this top 10 principles of resilient organizations has a few of them that are useful for us as well. Resilience habits is something important. Balancing socialization and privacy. Accounting for different beginnings. You know, many of our universities have had to start almost from scratch with the blended and the online learning strategies, policies, and implementations. Let's not use the waggy finger, meaning let's understand each other and build on whatever person, whatever institution brings to the table, and learn from that without saying, no, you are doing something wrong. You should be doing X, Y, Z. Let's embrace, the differences and be inclusive as much as we can when we think of resilience. Embracing synergies. One of the two professors this morning highlighted the principle of synergy, of networking. So what are now the obstacles to resilience construction? And here I'm basing my points on what Doheny and colleagues looked at also in 2020. So you see a lot of very recent resources when it comes to resilience and resilience building. So the most frequently mentioned barriers are lack of time, staff time, but also student time, lack of institutional mandate and buy-in, but also acknowledgement of what people bring to the table. There's the issue of digital literacy or technology-based literacy, which in many cases was very poor, both on the staff side and the learner staff, was very poor at the beginning of the pandemic. We are now looking at higher digital literacy, but we're not fully there yet. We also knew that the digital systems were limited. Many of the academics, because of the fear and the anxiety and the stress they experienced, were actually unwilling to change, unwilling to adapt to the new situations. They were very little flexible. So those are all perhaps obstacles to resilient building. Now I would like to go into a few of the solutions. What can we do to build resilience, on a daily basis in each and every institution all around our continent? We need to look at open education. Open education, which is an umbrella term for some of the things I will look at just now. It encompasses resources, tools, and practices free of legal, financial, and technical barriers. And these resources, tools, and practices can be fully used, shared, and adapted to our local contexts. So open education, of course, encompasses open educational resources for teaching, for learning, for research. They are shared under public domain or with an open license. We all know about the CC, the Creative Commons licenses. They include textbooks, videos, podcasts, screencasts, courses, modules, complete programs, tests, assignments, software, and it is there for us to share, meaning to redistribute, to retain, to reuse, to revise, to remix. And what is all that for? So that teaching and learning can become more affordable, more equitable, and that will help us building resilience in our various institutions of higher education. Now, we know that there are also the so-called open technologies or open source technologies. And I've put a few examples on our screens, some of which you probably know: WordPress for blogging. You might know Joomla. There are many, many more, and I'm sure colleagues can share even in the chat some of these open technologies that we know. At the beginning of the pandemic, because we needed to have learning management systems, many of us turned towards Moodle, and we have now gained some form of expertise, many of us throughout Africa, in the use of Moodle and in the adaptation of Moodle to our local needs with the various plugins. Many of these plugins are open source technologies. And if we want to build resilience, that is definitely the way we need to go, using those open source technologies. Now I want us to look at a few character traits that maybe are with us already, but that definitely need to be enhanced. And if you look at that little image there, which says there's a young man thinking, they only taught me how to think outside the box. This is what we are telling our learners almost every day. Think outside the box, be creative, be innovative. But then this person, the thinking outside the box, he's taken it so literally. And so he's saying, I'm not trained for circles. So the flexibility there is not gained. And I thought this was a lovely way to look at it. So flexibility seems to be a buzzword. It seems to be a keyword when we look at the International Council of Distance Education, their Quality Network report, which is dated February 2021. We know that flexibility is an important point. I'm not going to go through the 7 benefits of flexibility or the 7 characteristics of flexibility, but just to remind us that that really has to do with when, where, and how learning and teaching takes place. So flexible learning, over the years, 4 clear representations of this flexible learning have emerged. Flexible learning as an efficient practice, flexible learning as the means of gaining a competitive edge, flexible learning as achieving equity, and flexible delivery. And this is again where the technology base comes in, the use of information and communication technologies for flexible delivery. So flexibility is when, where, what pace, how, for all those involved. That is flexibility. So it's the ability to change or be changed easily according to a situation. We know that in principle, flexible learning should be learner-centered, encouraging greater independence and autonomy, and that then leads to self-directedness. And I'm going to talk to that about that just now. So flexibility is something that can build our resilience, because if we are more flexible, if we easily adapt to change, we are more resilient to whatever comes our way. So I said I was going to link it to self-directedness. Now, what is self-directed learning? And I'm going back to a text. It's actually based on Nowell's 1975 definition of the concept, but Garrison in 97 rearranged the definition slightly, and it's that one that I would like us to look at. So self-directed learning is defined as an approach where learners gradually assume personal responsibility and control of both cognitive and contextual processes. Cognitive being the idea of self-monitoring. Where am I? Where am I going? What do I need to continue my learning process? And contextual processes has to do with self-management. Can I manage my time? Can I manage my resources? Can I manage my learning? And all that is to construct and evaluate meaningful and worthwhile learning outcomes. Now, this, of course, is looked at from the perspective of the student. We want our students to be self-directed. But we also want ourselves as educational stakeholders to be self-directed. And we would like our institutions to be self-directed as a component of resilience. So applying what we learn in a new context is part of self-directedness. Exploring alternatives and making sound decisions is part of self-directedness. And we need this to build resilience. Now I would like to talk to you a little bit on what we did at the University of Eswatini. I know you're probably thinking, well, Eswatini is a small country. You know, the University of Eswatini is maybe not a big institution, but we did put in place important strategies, and we made important interventions that I think all of us can learn something from. So as I've said at the beginning, there was very little communication between management and staff and students, and that was quite disconcerting. But behind the scenes, there was some form of action, some form of movement. So very early on in 2020, actually immediately after the lockdown was instituted. So that was end of March, beginning of April 2020. The Center of Excellence in Learning and Teaching, together with the Institute of Distance Education, where I am based, we received a request from our Vice Chancellor to prepare a training program, and a small group of staff members were asked to collaborate and to start finding ways of supporting teaching staff and students to transition towards online learning. So to build that resilience at that particular level. So when we look at it a little bit more in detail, we note that there were 2 online courses that were set up in particular for teaching staff. And I will talk to you about one of them a little bit more in particular. The second course, TBL 003, focused more on hands-on practice. And all that was accompanied by webinars in which we held question and answer sessions, examples of how to do certain things, and a discussion on a particular topics, especially after participants had had some practical implementation experience. Now, those courses focused first on pedagogy, and then went on to combine those pedagogical aspects with the integration of ICTs, with the building upon the technology base. We really wanted to do that in a scaffolding approach. It was socio-constructivist and connectivist in nature, trying to bring together the different competencies and skills that the various members of the team and participants to the courses brought to us. So it was really at an introductory level, giving basic information and opportunities to practice, but also including a lot of food for thought, because we were all in the same boat. We were all facing the same pandemic. We were all trying to find solutions to the obstacles that were thrown our way. So this talks a little bit about one of the courses. So you see that the idea was to communicate and describe pedagogical and design strategies, capacitate participants to develop collaborative online tasks, recognize key considerations when we design an online course, and develop a plan. So this was done in May and June of 2020, and then these were the various topics that were in that one course, and these are the topics in more detail. I don't want to delve into that. I can do that if there are any further questions, but just to show you that putting in place such strategies really is of assistance when it comes to building resilience. And it needs to be done top down, but also from the bottom to the top. There needs to be that continuous interaction between the higher levels of the institution and the lower levels to make sure that everyone is included and everyone benefits from whatever intervention we put in place. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I think I want to just come to this slide, which talks about the changing roles of universities. And this is also something that we need to think about carefully when we look at the future. Disruptions will come our way time and time again. We need to look at the impact they have on the technological tools that we are using, on the rhythm of the teaching and learning, on the roles of the learner and the teacher, on the credibility of the programs we offer. Are they linked to what is needed in industry, in society? So that means we need to recalibrate, we need to re-engineer, redesign the learning models we use. The assessment, a lot of talk has been ongoing on how to do authentic online assessment. This is also something that we need to keep on thinking about. Now, with all that, I'm coming to my conclusion. And my conclusion is that there are many questions that remain. Where are we? All of us are probably at different stages of dealing with the pandemic and finding strategies and models to continue and to grow and to develop. Where do we want to go? We need to be forward-looking, outward-looking. What do we want in 50 years' time, in 100 years' time? How can we prepare for subsequent pandemics and other disasters and challenges coming our way? We know that there are many possible solutions that are coming from the four furthest places on our continent. But they require that we cooperate, that we collaborate, that we are flexible, and that all the individuals, the individuals, but also all the institutions, all the societies, all the peoples are flexible. And we need to continue networking just like we are doing today. So among the solutions, but there are many more, there are open education, open educational resources, open technologies. So with that, I hope that I've touched upon some of the main questions, and I hope that I've touched upon some of the possible solutions. Life is not about how fast we run or how high we climb, but how well we bounce and get new energy and get solutions from what we've lived through and what we continue to live through. Here are some of the references of the works I have looked at to prepare for today's talk. And with this, I would like to say to all of you, thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening to me. And I really look forward to the discussion that will follow shortly. Thank you all.
Thank you so very much, Professor Ferreira-Meyers. I hope I got the name right. Indeed, this was an awesome, good one. This was an awesome keynote address. We thank you for that detailed, well-structured, and very informative and insightful presentation. I guess we have a few minutes for questions and answers. We are already 11:20, and so we could allow questions and answers for about some 5 minutes. Is that correct, Madam Nodumo?
Okay, Prof. Thank you. We have 4 people who are our high-level panelists. So they are going to respond to the presentation. I don't know if you could allow me to introduce them, and then we would initially give those 4 people the opportunity to respond to the presentation.
Madam Nodumo,
yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 4 high-level panelists who are going to help us to respond and interrogate the topic. The first one that I will introduce, they will not necessarily come in this order, but we will wait to be guided by them in terms of their readiness. Professor Rim Bahat, she's the president of Egypt University of Informatics, former advisor to the Minister of Communications and Information Technology in Egypt. She has a PhD in computer science from Imperial College London, MSc in computer science, and also a BSc in computing and statistics. I'll be brief with the introductions. The next high-level panelist is Professor Clement Jidonu. He's the founding president of Accra Institute of Technology. He's a professor in computer science at Accra Institute of Technology. He has received several awards. He received his doctorate from Trinity College in Dublin. The next high-level panelist is Ms. Suadu Bugoma. She's a PhD student and researcher at the University of Burundi, East Africa. She's working on a research on assessing the effects of trade liberalization in the East African community. The fourth respondent is Professor Eugene Oke. He's a coordinator of training in science and mathematics education at the University of Abomey Calavi in Cotonou, Benin. He's responsible for bachelor's and master's degrees. He also supports courses at the Institute of Mathematics and Physical Sciences. He holds a PhD in Science and Technology Didactics from the University of Abomey Calavi. So in brief, these are our respondents, Professor Goski Alabi. So maybe you could invite them to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we start with Professor Bakat, if I get her name correct, permit me to make a very brief comment, particularly with reference to what has just been presented to us. And I want us to remember in addressing this theme of building technology-based resilience universities now, that we should not only be looking at coping with the pandemic, because there are many more disruptions that are likely to come. We need to start thinking in terms of the technological disruptions and start asking ourselves questions about 10 years from now, how we reimagine higher education. We really need to start reimagining higher education in the face of artificial intelligence, robotics, humanoids, Internet of Things, augmented realities, and all of those, and start engaging in a way that allows us to use the 3-stage model that has just been presented to us. My opinion is that it appears we keep focusing more on coping. And if I got it right, the 3-stage approaches involve 1, anticipation, 2, coping, and 3, adaptation. To what extent are we anticipating higher education in 10 years to come and reimagining it? If we can have humanoids like Sophia that moves from one country to the other, attending conferences and delivering and making presentations, if we have Alexa that students or faculty can just speak to and ask questions anyhow without going to surf on the internet, and Alexa would provide real information to the students or to the faculty, how do we reimagine higher education in the next 10 years? And this is why the concept of openness itself needs to be reconceptualized. So I believe that in this, our discourse, we would be also mindful very much on the anticipation stage and also the different forms of disruptions that we need to prepare for. Thank you very much. On that note, we could start with Professor Bakat. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you first for this invitation. It's very fruitful to me to be in this panel panel and in this meeting and conference. It's really very, very fruitful and useful to me. Can you hear me well, or it's okay? You can hear me well?
Yes, we can. We can. Yes, we can. Thank you
very much. And would like to thank Professor Ferreira-Meyers. In fact, I think all of us were commenting, if you can see the chat, that it's been very, very useful, excellent presentation. So thank you for all these arrangements, your research, and then actually presenting this. So thank you very much. We very much benefited from it. Thank you. And I also would like to say that I second Ms. Alabi's comment about the different technological disruptions that are coming on the way, and that we need to anticipate and we need to prepare ourselves. I present North Africa. I'm the president of Egypt University of Informatics, but I'm here presenting some of the building of technology-based resilient universities in North Africa. So let me very quickly go through my thoughts on this regard. I'll go a step backward, if you allow me, and say that when I saw the title, I saw the resilience of universities from two perspectives. One is resilience against the technology advancement, and the other is the technology-based resilience of universities. And I went back with my thoughts actually before the COVID-19. Some years back before the COVID-19, when we started having a problem, facing problems with our students, basically because there is a lot of our students are having access to the internet, and then they have a wealth of resources throughout the internet, and it's for free. Some of these resources can be false or shallow, and others can be correct and in-depth, has in-depth information. And based on that, we really need to think deeply on changing our teaching and learning methodologies and to adapt to the new environment, because it became challenging for us to teach in the classic way to our students, because they may have even more information than we are providing in classes. So at that time, there had to be an adaptation of the teaching and learning practices. We started evaluating the online resources. I'm talking about our institutes at that time. Evaluating the online resources, and we decided to intervene and providing our students with the access to the proper resources. For example, if we go to Coursera courses, and we can even provide our students to access to these resources and encourage them to look at these courses and their content. While some other information, we need to direct them that this information, they have to question every piece of information that they can get through the internet. It's also adapting our teaching methodologies, that it's not that the instructor is going to the class and is just giving or delivering some material, even if he or she has the capabilities for attracting students and being interactive with the students and so on. Still, students may be already prepared with more information. So some of our instructors were actually proactive and also collaborating with the management of the institute, and decided, yes, we will give the material to the students beforehand, and we will ask them to do their surveys and research, and then the class would be more of question answers and discussions and more of interaction. So it is more towards it's not really self-directed learning for the students, but it's more towards not one direction teaching, if I may say. Also, the university decided to go for developing its online resources. basically because to provide the resources that we really want the student to study, and not only what the student can find online from different resources. So this is really being resilient against the technology advancement. I don't mean by against that we are against it, but really is how to, if I may say, react to what we found, the wealth of information over the internet. But then the other direction of seeing things, or the other aspect, is really to develop technology-based universities, resilience. And of course, the challenges that I am putting here are known to all of us. And this came very clearly through the COVID-19 period, actually, that there is still lack of internet access or insufficient bandwidth at some students and teachers' households, especially when teachers also are in their homes and teaching students. And if both have a problem of internet access, then we really have a serious problem. For some of the disadvantaged students, they don't have the necessary hardware or computers or laptops or tablets at their home. Again, we, and I'm talking about countries, I guess, at that time, by that time, we started even before the COVID-19 to have projects for developing online university courses. But yet it was limited because of lack of time from the staff members, because we didn't feel the necessity at that time for this, because of lack of experience and training for our staff. So we had course content, but they were not enough. And I'm talking about, I think, all across all countries. The other thing is also faculty members were always against having practical labs, that they are moved online. So we always wanted the students to come to the labs at the universities and have their practical exercises there. All this has changed with the COVID-19, of course. The other thing is lack of online educational platforms at that time. They were limited, of course. Okay, the limited digital and pedagogical skills of the instructors for online education, and the limited resources for fair and in-depth assessment digital tools. And I think we still lack this to some extent. Okay. I'll just say I will give a few examples from different North African countries and what they have taken as actions during the COVID-19. And in a nutshell, for example, an example is Tunisia. Tunisia, what they've done to solve these problems is that they already had a virtual university called Virtual University of Tunis, which was teaching distance learning and online courses. And as a quick solution, and very, very good solution, actually, the university offered its resources as well as training to other universities. So university students across Tunisia were using its platforms and courses content, as well as getting the staff member getting trained, or the instructors getting trained to develop their own. The other thing that Tunisia have taken as a step is providing financial support to some of the institutes to develop the distance learning facilities, infrastructure, facilities, equipments, and the courses, which was a very good move to help them move forward in this direction. Another example is Morocco, for example. Morocco, in order to solve the problem of equity or the lack of availability of internet, for example, access, or the good access of internet with good bandwidth in some places, they used several distance education channels. So, for example, including not only the internet access with its platforms, but also TV channels. So not only the MOOC, but it's also TV channels and other channels. What they've done also, in fact, the internet providers, they increased the bandwidth but they also avail a free internet access for students, which was a very good move from their side. Another example is in Egypt, and please allow me that I have a few more points to say because I'm involved in that, so I know more about the activities taking place. But before the COVID-19, some years before the COVID-19, there was this move by the Ministry of Higher Education as a national project is to provide online courses content to all universities in Egypt, to all students, and to make it open for all of them. So if one university is developing some of the courses, then it's put online for all students across Egypt. This was taking place in addition to training, of course, of the instructors, but yet it was moving slowly because of the resistance and again, not feeling the necessity. But this proved to be very helpful during the COVID-19, and then it moved fast forward after that. The other, of course, activity is increasing the internet bandwidth, in fact, doubling it and more, and increasing the internet access infrastructure in providing it in remote areas. Also, some of the university didn't have the fiber version of it, some in Egypt, and this had twofold for two reasons. One is because of the movement in Industry 4 and the importance of the IT specializations in the market, like AI, IoT, and robotics, etc. But the other side is also looking at it because these specialized graduates would be necessary to help in actually in programs for education and for other services across the country, not just as IT specialists, but also IT specialists that we need. I mean, we always lack IT specialists because they are needed in all fields, including education. So that was how it was needed. And of course, the last move that the government has done is establishing even a specialized university where I'm coming from, Egypt University of Informatics, which is a specialized university only for the ICT and ICT related topics. I'm not going to go more than that, I think, because I needed just to put some comments and to allow my colleagues in the panel to discuss. But if you need any further information about any of what I spoke about or about Egypt University of Informatics, we can do that separately. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bhagat, for that very insightful presentation too. That is really good because you stayed well within time. We would like to have the next three, and the next one would be from Professor Clement Jijanu. Professor Jijanu, you have the floor, please.
Very good. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Thanks to the keynote and my colleagues for throwing some light on this issue of building a resilient university in the technological era. I'm just going to touch on one or two issues just to complement and supplement what my colleagues have already said. It's obvious that the unprecedented rapid growth in global technologies, especially the educational technologies, is actually revolutionary the way we learn and acquire knowledge, and for that matter, conduct research. The availability of these technological options and solutions to deliver quality academic programs and services, and also to reach a wider group of student body to serve them better, and it's imperative that universities will look at how they offer and deliver their academic programs and services. In other words, the technology itself is not just about using it to support our, what I call our manual teaching and learning, or our analog teaching and learning process. The technology itself is offering us opportunity to actually relook and redesign how we deliver education in universities. For example, the technology, as we are all aware, is removing a lot of traditional barriers in terms of time and distance. Here, I'm not talking about time only in terms of time, but also talking about time in terms of the time between the lecturer and the student in the classroom. It is removing the distance between the lecturer and the students. In other words, the concept of distance education is no more operative. In other words, the technology has removed the distance and the time element of offering high quality education. So these technologies, no doubt, are impacting all aspects of education provision at all levels, not only the university. And it's transforming the way we are delivering education. The technologies we are talking about are now available. I must say that this issue of using technology to support education started at a very time when the internet started to make an impact in the early 80s. Since the beginning of the internet, in particular, we have been talking about using technology to impact education. Some universities have moved ahead and have done it, and some are still far behind in deploying this technology. So the technological opportunities certainly are offering us a chance to remodel, to repurpose, and to transform our higher education delivery. In other words, the question is the lecturer still the person who stands in front of the class to deliver, or stand at the back of the class and direct and guide? The role of the lecturer, even in this model, itself need to be re-examined. In other words, the technology is just not for us to implement teaching and learning or support teaching and learning. It goes beyond that, and it's actually transforming and changing the way we do our business. The keynote speaker eloquently talked about the concept of resilience. I particularly noted the model where they talk about anticipation, coping, and adaptation. And based on that, I can say that organizational resilience could be defined as the capability and the capacity of an organization to dynamically respond to and adapt to changes in organizational, operational, and external circumstances, challenges, and opportunities to achieve a desired objective through a well-stated goals, actions, and milestones, and the deployment of the necessary resources to bring about a change or transformation within a specific time frame. So borrowing from Katri's presentation, that is my take on the concept of resilience within an organization. Looking at it within the context of a university, we can talk about a technology-based resilient university implies that the university as an organizational setup can deploy technologies as part of its deployment of the needed resources to enhance its capabilities and capacities to dynamically respond and adapt to changes, challenges, and opportunities in higher education development and delivery, and of course, to support research now and in the future. Given that, we say a technology-based resilient university requires that the university within the content must respond within the content of a visioning framework. In other words, you need to get some map. And part of the mapping about how to do it is come up with a visioning framework and deploy the various capacities and capabilities to dynamically respond to the challenges, and of course, the infrastructure to do that. The expectation is that a technology-based resilient university should be capable of resiliently responding to those changes. We have a lot of changes in the technological area, the challenges, and of course, more importantly, the opportunities by adopting a technology-driven approach in terms of the inputs, the processes, and the output of actions to be taken to transform the development and the delivery of higher education services and support its research effort within a technological aid. That, to me, is my understanding of a resilient university within the context of delivering services in a technological age. What are the expectations? I would like to call this expectation in terms of what brought us here will not take us there kind of expectations. I'm presenting three quadrants, the first, second, third, and the fourth. The first is about the visioning that I talked about. Visioning, develop the vision for resiliently responding to challenges to deliver education and support research in the technological era, which is advancing rapidly. Things are changing every day. If you look at, if you are very much involved in the educational technology network, there's no day that passes without somebody sending you a solution, a new solution to use technology to support education. So we've gone way beyond the concept of e-library. We've gone way beyond the concept of using the technology for admissions. We've gone way beyond using just an ordinary learning management system to support education. The solutions now available to support educational delivery is mind-boggling, and it's changing on a daily basis. So for the university to chart its course through this minefield of technology to support education and research, they must have some visioning framework. The visioning framework will also incorporate some issues of strategies, institutional framework in order to support the university, in order to develop and use this technology to support teaching and learning in a technological age. The second quadrant, going clockwise, is the basic deployment, utilization, and integration of advanced and emerging educational and multimedia technology systems and infrastructure to support student life cycle and administrative activities, processes, and operations of the university. This is what I call the basic. There are a number of universities who have already gone beyond this. They have used the technology to support student life cycle from admissions all the way down to alumni support. Some universities have not yet mounted that particular stage, but that is the basic when it comes to the use of technology to support higher education delivery. I made a point earlier that this thing started far back in the 1980s. So which means that we've come a long way, that the basic that we can do is to use the technology to support student life cycle and administrative activities processing of this thing. The third quadrant is the important one, is what we talk going beyond using the technology to support educational delivery and research to explore, adopt, and implement innovative ways of teaching and learning delivery in a dynamic and changing environment of higher education development and provision, which is characterized by rapid technological changes and advancement, generally, and more importantly, in the educational technology solutions sector. Now, the point I'm making here is that I'm giving an analogy. Take, for example, the the car. The car moved from an analog stage. Inside your car now, we have your basic car. That will move you from point A to point B. We have a number of electronic gadgets that is designed to enrich your driving experience. Now, the technology availability itself has even changed the whole concept of driving. We have the autonomous driverless car, which is saying that it's not more about moving you from point A to point B using technologies. The technologies have actually changed the whole concept of driving. It's the same thing. Let me give another example in the mobile phone. Mobile phone is just a portable telephone. But now what the mobile phone can do gone beyond using technology for communication. Because of the technology, the mobile phone now have a lot of other options. So it's not just using the technology to support communications. The technology itself have provided various solutions and options that have enriched the business of communicating using that gadget, which we call a portable mobile phone. Bringing to the university sector, in the second quadrant, we are talking about e-library, using the technology to support e-library services of the university. In the third quadrant, we are not talking about e-library anymore. By virtue of having e-library, do we still use the same method of students going to the e-library, picking up a book to support learning on a particular subject, or the technology itself will not make it possible for us to do something more than that? In other words, for example, create a personalized e-library for a given subject, for the given student in a given semester. Is the e-library the resources linked to the students' learning resources? So you see, there are a lot of examples that we can use to demonstrate how we can, at the supply and demand side, move processes both vertically and horizontally to elevate the whole learning experience of our students just because we have the technology. So it goes beyond using the technology to support teaching and learning. The fourth quadrant, going clockwise, is what I call the development and implementation of a robust, what brought us here will not take us there, rapid response strategy of the university to dynamically respond to and adapt to changes and challenges and opportunities within the higher education sector to bring about a transformation. This reinforces the point I made earlier, that the landscape of the technology to support teaching and learning is changing on a daily basis. You need some kind of a strategy as a university about how the university will be responding to, adapting and addressing challenges, and of course, taking advantage of opportunities in order to drive in this rapid changing technological era. Well, the COVID came, another COVID may come. I'm not very much interested in that. I am saying that the technology itself is actually changing our business. And we need a strategy, a kind of a rapid response strategy in order to address this as we go through the years. We are asked to relate some of what we say to what we are doing in our universities. At the Accra Institute of Technology, we have done the visioning and the institutional development framework to guide us. We did that 4 years ago. In the second quarter, using the technology to support student life cycle, we are almost done. Only alumni and a few other things are left. And we have been doing that for the past 6 years. On the third quadrant of really going beyond using the technology to support educational delivery, in other words, scaling up, enhancing, using the technologies to really transform the way we do our business, for us is work in progress. As per the strategy, the rapid response strategy, we are still developing that. So all in all, Professor Moderator, the nutshell is that we have been on this road since 1980. And a lot have happened in our sector, both the delivering of our university services and the technology to support it. And we are moving way beyond just using technologies to support the teaching and learning, to actually using the technology opportunity itself to transform and change the way we do teaching and learning in our universities in order to enrich student experience. And I think colleagues need to be aware of that. I thank you for the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tijanu, for that very practical insight into what AIT is doing. We trust that we'll be able to share all of this. We now have Ms. Suwadu Bugoma. Ms. Suwadu Bugoma, thank you for speaking on behalf of the students. We are happy to have you now. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Goski Alabi, for giving me this opportunity to be a member of this great event and to have the opportunity also to speak and to share what has been done here in Burundi according to the response on COVID-19 related to education. I'm really, really thankful for this opportunity. So we know that, first of all, I would like first to introduce my country. I'm from the University of Burundi, and Burundi is a small country. We call it the heart of Africa. It has almost 12 million population, and 80% of them, they are employed in the agriculture sector. I mentioned this to show the importance of, or to show the distribution of the population according to activities have been done here in Burundi. So when COVID-19 came, many countries have had different responses to COVID-19 impacts, either on education, on health, on other sectors. But regarding to this education sector, there was no big impact in Burundi, given that the primary school and secondary school did not close. They were still open. But the impact was seen in the high schools, especially universities, when programs were affected by the pandemic. And also, the big impact have been seen on the state academic mobilities, because with the COVID-19, there was expansion of these mobilities. And some of the universities, I cannot say all the universities, there were only some of the universities we tried to move from the face-to-face teaching to the online system, but really, it was not easy to deal with according to the situation which was there before COVID-19. And among those challenges, there was this one, poor internet services. There was also erratic power supply, and there was inadequacies in infrastructure. And also, there was also a issue of students, they didn't have capacities to deal with online management system. So this was among the issues that really show that there is a need and a great need to deal with COVID-19 issues. According to organizational resilience, we can show that these challenges will persist and are changing every day. Something about COVID-19 impact and maybe other challenges which will come. So we need an Afrocentric governance model for development and to improve preparedness and response capacities at national level. But we can say that we need like this change in institution, but we know that if this is not done on national level, it's still a problem. And when you say national level, become here the idea of cooperation between several stakeholders. there was also a need of good resource allocation. When I say resource allocation, we know that I can say like there is a great importance which has been allocated to education, but with the COVID-19, it shows that we need this one investment and good allocation of resources to education system. They also need of investment in capacity building. As we saw that the students themselves, they didn't have the capacity to deal with the e-learning system, and there is also a need and in manipulation of ICT to support education. When I say like need of manipulation of ICT, I'm not only relating to students, also to teachers, to institutions leaders. So there is a need of manipulation of ICT tools on all levels of education system. And as we know, everything cannot be possible if the government can collaborate with stakeholders and collaborate with all like person who can be interesting to make technology and to make ICT a tool to support education. So I would like just to end here, and I say again, thank for this opportunity that has given to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the wonderful student's perspective. We would now like to have Professor Sagbenong Eugene. Okay, I hope I got the name right. The floor is yours, Prof.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. First, I thank the organizers of this discussion, which discuss a topical issue. I thank Professor Karen for his sufficiently clear presentation. I will go straight. The concept of resilience is a concept from the physical of material, and it refers to the ability of a body to change shape to adapt to external effects. This concept is transferred to the human psyche. Each of us has a capacity or potential for resilience. Professor Karen's presentation is sufficiently explained on the understanding of the concept. But the question for African university is how to develop this resilience. I want to come now to the concept note question to suggest responses approach. First, how do African universities take advantage of partnership to share resources so that costs for individual institutions are minimized? I can cite the case of the University of Abu Mekalabi. Now we are developing a competence center in digital education with a participation of Federal Polytechnic School of Lausanne. Currently, there is a training of 3 experts in technology, in techno-pedagogical engineering, who are colleagues involved in the academy, manager of the training courses. We also have 2 technicians who must be trained to set up and operate the device. Ultimately, They will train around 30 of their peers to set up distance learning courses in the establishment of the competence center. We hope that this will come to fruition and that it will be a lever to allow the University of Abomey-Calavi to initiate these transformations. Secondly, how do African universities access technological innovation to strengthen the achievement of their fundamental mandates and improve their awareness initiative? How can African university do to promote equitable access and inclusion of all indigenous people on the continent, regardless of their place of residence or their situation in life? I can say that studies must be carried out to carry out an inventory of features in each university and study the possible solution in terms of cost. We must realize that training is necessary. As teachers, we must recognize that we are not yet equipped to initiate this transformation. So, first of all, we need to be trained in the use of new digital tools in our universities. The training of this entire administrative and academic university chain. This requires a question of oneself, the progress planning of the establishment of a mixed functionary of all the university structure, registration, administration, academy, examination, results, monitoring, and graduate exit. The reflects to seize all the opportunities that may arise in terms of support, the equipment that has to go along with the training. Should we wait for the public authorities for equipment? Should we go to the partners who are the companies using graduates? Should we go to the banks? We must think about it and put in place a sectorial plan of development of the university over several terms of chancellor or rector. The drafting of this sectorial development plan must be in together all the players in order to combine the ideas and develop strengths. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that perspective. We would like to thank all the panelists for the very in-depth and insightful presentations you have made. We've all heard, and I guess the time is now up for us to open the floor for comments and contributions, questions, but as much as possible, please remember to keep it short and simple, because we have about 15 minutes more to go, and I hope that we are going to do well to be within time. Could we have other comments, questions, contributions? A lot has been said, right from the keynote address about our preparation to the disruptions and the changes that are likely to come, and how we brace ourselves for the adversity and ensure that we are resilient. We have heard from the students' perspective. We have heard about the call from the students for government intervention and support. We have also heard about the partnerships. We have heard from our two other professors, Professor Bagat, who told us what they have been doing in their universities and the need for us to scale up. We've heard from Professor Clement Dijonu, who told us what is happening in his university and the need for us to look beyond the resources we have now to library resources and other supportive interventions. Please, comments and contributions on all of these presentations would be very helpful.
But I think we have to build resilience into the entire program. If AAU can make this just as the very beginning, that we can now go from here, if nothing, being more sub-regional activities, so that we can hear more, particularly from the French-speaking countries. It will be just an exchange as well as a training program, so that this doesn't end as a simple conference report, but the beginning of a set of activities to ensure that between now and the near future, we'll take into consideration what you said earlier as chairperson, the reimagining, and in response to the reimagining, see how we can use emerging technology and become resilient in the use of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Obanya. It's always a joy to hear from your fountain of knowledge. Thank you, sir. Yes, please. Can we see other hands up? Any other contributions? If there are not, I guess that we will be getting ready to bring the session to a close. Okay, I see one more hands up. So we have, is it Professor or Dr. Judson Addy? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I'm with the Africa Private Sector Summit. I'm delighted to be a part of this program and the reports we're hearing in terms of foresight for the Association of African Universities and its leadership with other universities. The key thing here for us from the private sector is collaboration that we look for, that the universities and the private sector, in particular the Chamber of Commerce, can begin to work together very closely to tailor the skill sets needed for the country and the continent as a whole, as it relates to the conversion of the natural resources of the continent. So we welcome the direction that the AAU is taking. We look forward to being a strong partner to AAU in accomplishing its goals. Someone mentioned partnerships, particularly in terms of funding for the institution. We're looking at that. We think that it is key to transforming not just the infrastructure requirements of the university, but also attracting the skill set in terms of our professional outside of the continent to return to the continent and make meaningful contribution. So I'd like to applaud all of you, and we look forward to a very strong working relationship with the AAU. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Addy. And now we would have a Professor El Sabata.
Fine. I'm sorry, it just refused to unmute itself. I'm also from the private sector, and my institution is Afeba Balola University, Ado-Ekiti, a relatively young institution of only 11 years of age. It has been a very exciting week. Unfortunately, due to my busy schedule, I could not stay true at each and every session, but I want to most sincerely congratulate AAU. This is indeed achieving the results we want to achieve through a dynamic, collaborative, and training week. The Africa 2021 University celebrations, we celebrated not only the today's universities, but the universities that we are working together to achieve the real universities that will be technology-driven and technology-based universities. I have been extremely impressed with the organization, also with the excellent preparations and choice of our resource persons. There is no doubt. Personally, I am more informed, and I'm looking forward, as the other speakers said, for a real, indeed, result-oriented partnership to bring about the technology-driven higher education in Africa. Once again, I congratulate the organizers, the distinguished resource persons, and the spirit of togetherness of our continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Elsabetta. I think that those were very directed comments. And as we don't see any more hands, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the AAU and all the organizers for a very good work done. Indeed, they still bring in Africa together through university activities. We would like to request that the AAU kindly send to us all the presentations that were made, if that is possible. We will be very happy with that. I also would like to touch on the collaborations and partnerships, particularly the partnership that has been proposed with the Chambers of Commerce. I think that that would be a great opportunity for us to get to know more about what industry is doing and to tailor our programs more towards the needs of industry. I also would like to propose that where possible, the AAU could consider organizing a higher education fair where institutions can come and present innovations, showcase the innovations that are taking place in their various institutions and how they are preparing themselves to be resilient. I want to believe that during such a fair, it should not be another platform for sharing experiences or for talking and making presentations. It should be solely for showcasing the innovations that different institutions are making. I want to thank the president of the AAU for such a good work done, and also to my colleague and very good friend, our own Secretary General, Professor Oyewole, for this very impressive organization. It's been very well organized, very structured. The content that we have received is enormous, and we want to thank you and your team, particularly Madam Nodumo, that led the technical preparations and logistics through this program. We are most grateful for the opportunity to participate. And on that note, I'd like to hand over to Madam Nodumo, who would bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would also like to thank our very able moderator, Professor Goski Alabi, for handling this session so professionally. Thank you, Professor Goski. If you'd allow me, I'll just read like 4 comments that I picked from the chat before I ask Professor Olusola Oyewole to close us. There was a comment from Dr. Cosmas Mnyanyi from the Department of Psychology and Special Education at the Open University of Tanzania. I think he was emphasizing the need to think about assistive special technologies and also how we support persons with disabilities, including ICT for the blind and ICT for the deaf. There was also a comment from Omosa Elijah, who said that in Kenya, we are yet to have an open university. Instead, what we have are open learning centers by different universities. I think that was just a general contribution. There was also a contribution from Taiwo Omoni Oti Tolaye, who said technological-based education and development must be data-driven. The challenging world and needs of our time has incorporated virtual learning, so Africa must come of age, adopt and adapt to the modern ways of learning. The last comment I picked was from Olubanke Ogulana, who said innovative thinking supported by dynamic leadership and policy is the best response to challenges and opportunities. And this is key for moving towards an evolving resilience of higher education and making Africa to stand out. So thank you very much, everyone, for staying with us up to this time. I would now like to call upon my boss, Professor Olusola Oyewole, to give his comments and to also close us. Thank you very much.
I say, following all the contributions we made in the past 1 week, we need to live from here to be resilient in standing to the challenges of our time. Let us live from here to be resilient in investing in the available technologies for teaching and learning in our various institutions. We need to build resilience into our process of teaching and learning. One thing that has come clear in this week is that there is need for us to collaborate and partner with each other in order to build strong higher education institutions in Africa. This is the time for universities in Africa to rise up to the challenges of our time. My intention is that no African university should be left behind. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, before we bring this week to a close, permit me to appreciate the professional staff in the Association of African Universities. Madam Nodumo, you and your team were one of the best group of people that any Secretary General can work with. I want to appreciate you. I want everybody to please celebrate these great people who are in AAU with me. AAU is having one of the best set of professionals that anybody can work with in Africa. We appreciate you all. Permit me also to thank the board of AAU. You've been very tremendous. You can imagine the president of AAU who is in Sudan, and because of the lockdown of internet in Sudan, he had to travel down to Egypt just to be part of this program. Dear President, and indeed all the board members, I appreciate you all, and I thank you for your contributions to this 1 week of celebration. I want to thank all these panel chairmen and women, and especially the immediate session chair, Professor Goski Alabi. It's been nice working with you. Thank you for that suggestion you're giving us on the possibility of having a higher education innovation fair. I want to promise you that we shall look into this. Finally, let me tell you what we in AU will be doing following this week. One, we are going to put on our website all the slides of the presentations so that everyone can get there and get the presentation to learn from them. Secondly, we are writing a brief on what universities should do to become technology-based resilient universities. And I hope that this will give guidance to universities, and those of our leaders who have not been able to participate can also be connected to the outcome of our deliberations in this past 1 week. With this brief comment, I want to thank all those who have spent their time, who have made contributions to this. I appreciate one of the comments made finally among those who are in this particular session, that we need innovative thinking backed up with great leadership. With all this in our institutions, our universities and our higher education institutions will not remain the same. Let me re-emphasize again that AU is committed to seeing the building up of our universities for us to meet up the challenges of our time. Thank you, everyone. And I want to especially appreciate our daddy, Pai Obayan. Daddy, thank you for being part of this program. We appreciate you all. And with these comments, let me cut to a close the 2021 African University Week. It's been great being part of this. We appreciate you all. Thank you very much. So, Madam Nodumo, do you have something to say again? I think with this, we can bring this session to a close. We thank every one of us for participating. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Professor Oyewole. Thank you, everybody.